and welcome back to my channel. This is Roxana from Eutopian Lettings, and in this video I want to go over the deposits. I want you to find out what the obligations of a landlord are, regardless if you are a landlord or a tenant. And by knowing that, you're going to be able to find out if there's anyone who has breached their obligations. So let's have a look at the deposit protection. Whenever a tenant moves in a new property, the landlord has 30 days to collect the deposit and put it in a deposit protection scheme. And after that, they have to send the certificate to the tenant. And this legislation applies to all properties that were let after April 2007. There are a few things that the landlord is not allowed to collect from a tenant. Some of the prohibited fees are fees for property viewings, for references, for guarantors, and all of that. Right to rent. Right now, a landlord is not allowed to collect pet fees and renewal fees, which means that if the contract expired, then it needs to be renewed. Agencies or landlords used to charge a fee for that, but now they're no longer allowed to, and if an agency wants to charge a fee, they have to charge the landlord, not the tenant. And any third-party fees, for example, gardening services and so on. So these things are not chargeable to the tenant. It's not legal to charge a tenant those things. Okay, and I want to also go over the penalties for breach of legislation. So if a landlord doesn't comply with the law because they didn't know or because they just don't want to, then a breach of legislation is considered a civil offense, and it can be a financial penalty of up to £5,000, with a further breach within 5 years of the imposition of a financial penalty to be considered as criminal offense. So the fine for doing it once is £5,000. The fine for doing it repeatedly is unlimited, so any amount would do, depending on the court. Another consequence of a landlord not paying the deposit on time is the fact that the tenant is entitled to compensation, and the landlord is not allowed to evict the tenant. If the landlord tries to evict the tenant and they haven't provided them with all the documents required at the beginning of the tenancy, which is the certificates for EPC, gas safety certificates, and a few other things, and amongst that it has to be the certificate for this deposit, then if the landlord hasn't provided those things, they cannot evict the tenant. They cannot serve a legal eviction notice to a tenant. Okay, and the tenant can ask for compensation if their deposit was not protected. And here is where a tenant can go to ask for compensation. They can either go to the local trading standard office. We have to look on Google because every single area in the UK has a different office for trading standards, and if this was done by an agent, any complaints towards an agency have to be directed to the redress scheme or the property ombudsman, because they are the regulating bodies for estate agents. So to summarize, you need to make sure that your landlord provided you with a certificate after 30 days after you have signed the agreement and moved in the property. a deposit certificate, and there are 3 deposit schemes. So the deposit, they have to tell you the deposit has to mention the reference number and the deposit scheme where it's placed and the amount, of course. I mentioned the fees earlier because if you paid an amount and it doesn't correspond the amount on your certificate, you have to make sure that you were not charged any of these things. That was the purpose of this slide. So make sure you were not charged that, and then if you were charged that, you can take your landlord to court, you can ask for compensation, and you can complain to the regulator bodies, trading standards, or the property redress scheme, depending whether you were dealing with the landlord or with the agency. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.